How many of you have psychological needs? Would you raise your hand if you have psychological needs? Okay. I'm not asking you to confess these, okay? Although that could be very interesting. But I just would like to know whether you have them or not. Okay, I can see many people agreeing. I'm not surprised because in Western culture, people have had psychological needs since 1929. Okay, they've been around since 1929, and they're increasingly popular. Today, more and more people have psychological needs. So this was a new understanding. Action is a surface manifestation of a psychological need, is a relatively new idea in the history of the world's culture. It's a novel idea. Okay. How many of you have relationship dynamics? Would you raise your hand if you have relationship dynamics? Okay. I'm not surprised at that either, because these have been around since the 1960s. And a lot of people have relationship dynamics these days. In fact, they're becoming increasingly popular. And relationship dynamics have been very successful. And so, now, I'm not saying that before the onset of relationship dynamics, I'm not saying that people were happier in their relationships with others. At times they were still miserable and in conflict. It wasn't constructed in terms of dynamics. Is that clear? That's a new construction. Okay. Earlier on we talked about personal properties like strengths. Well, how many of you have resources, personal resources? Okay. Okay. These have been around for longer than psychological needs. They've been around for a couple of 100 years or so. It's been a growing development. And the whole idea that we have these personal properties is associated with the development of modern liberal theory. Liberal theory provides the basis of the Western democratic state. Okay. Some of you may have studied liberal theory in your undergraduate training, in your courses on politics or whatever. And so one of the cornerstones of liberal theory was the preservation, the recognition and preservation of the individual's right to own property, to possess property. It also preserved the individual's right to capitalise on their property. To capitalise on their property by mining it, okay, and to bring to the surface these resources, okay, or by cultivating their property to improve its assets. Okay. Now, around the same time, there was this new idea that maybe there is the self is like personal property, that we have a self that's like personal property, okay, that we can own in the same way that we can own actual property, land, okay, and so we can actually mine the self to discover the resources and to bring those resources to the surface and to put them into circulation. So how many internal miners are there in this group? How many of you found yourself in situations where you had to dig deep to get in touch with your resources and to put them into circulation? Internal miners in the group? Mining tradition? Okay. People from Rhoros here? Okay. And how many internal farmers are there in the group? How many of you have been into self-cultivation? The cultivation of the self. You know, cultivating this quality or this asset. Okay? So you're the internal farmers of the group. Okay. So these are relatively new understandings. This is all part of a tradition that is often referred to as structuralist. Action in life is a surface manifestation of some element or essence that comes from the centre of who we are. Okay? And these ideas are now taken for granted. You know, it's just naturally assumed that action is a surface manifestation of strengths, resources, psychological needs, relationship dynamics, and so on. Are you clear about that? That is almost never questioned. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that they're bad ideas. Is that clear? I think some of those ideas are very beautiful ideas. Okay. But I think it's important to understand that these ideas have been developed and constructed in history and in culture. Okay. If we understand that, we're not chained to the ideas, we're not tied to them. We can think outside of them.
As many of you know, I've been pretty interested in the idea of externalising problems for some time. I'd just like to make a few comments about externalising problems. The externalisation of problems is not to do with enabling people to rid themselves of responsibility for problems, but enables them to separate from the problem so they can decide whether or not they wish to cooperate with the problem or whether they wish to experiment with challenging the problem or defying it in some way. I've had great fun externalising problems, and I think last time that I was here I talked about my joy at externalising encopresis. I don't know whether anybody was here for that particular workshop, but I always like to talk about this because I wrote an article called Pseudo-encopresis, and the thing that distressed me about this article getting published was that the editors knocked off the introduction, and I always like to tell everybody about the introduction because I thought it was the best part of the paper, and I was very distressed that it was cut from the paper. But pseudo-encopresis is an approach to working with encopresis. Due to some political developments in a hospital that I was working in some years ago, I was referred encopresis for 12 months. And I needn't tell you about the nature of the political developments, but from, I guess you'd make some assumptions about what sort of political developments. And can you imagine having that big heap of encopresis facing you for 12 months, knowing that it was there and you had to somehow get over it. You had to somehow wade through it and get to the other side. And for a while I was a bit oppressed by this big heap of encopresis, and but then I realised that I had good credentials for working in the area, and I'd like to share those credentials with you. For some of you this is stale news, but I'd like to tell everybody about this because, as I said, it was one of the most important parts of this paper, was my credentials for working in the area of encopresis. When I left school, I started work as an engineering design draftsman, and my major project until I quit this line of work was designing sewage pumps. And I laboured over these sewage pumps. Whoops, it's the wrong word, labour. Make all these slips. I laboured over these sewage pumps for some time, and thought that I got them right, but every now and then they'd go wrong, so I'd have to go down to the sewage works to find out what was going wrong, and of course I had to somehow, well anyway, I won't tell you what I had to do, but I managed then to escape sewage, and at least I thought I did, as I moved up in the world somewhat. I was obviously this is an area where I've had a lot of aspirations in relation to, and I got a job with the Chrysler Corporation. That used to be a motor vehicle company in Australia. I don't know if it still exists here in the United States. I understand there's some rumour that that company still does work. And my job when I arrived was to clean rows upon rows of toilets, and to my dismay I was back into it again. Then there were some further developments, and I found myself right back into the shit again when I went to work for a child guidance clinic. So really it's been something that I've tried to escape from. I've tried to turn my back on, and I didn't really know that I was attracted to that sort of work. But when this other political development happened, after I'd been working at this hospital for a long time, I decided I should turn around and face it and stand up to it, stand up to encopresis, and I then started throwing myself into it. I mean, I started addressing what I needed to address. Okay, and I started working with these children who had encopresis. One of the reasons the paper is called pseudo-encopresis is because none of these children had real encopresis. Because according to most of the psychiatric textbooks, real encopresis is caused by ambivalent and intrusive mothers. And none of my sample could I discover one case that was caused by the mothers. So I realised that I wasn't really seeing encopresis. I was seeing kids who would shit in their pants all of the time, but I must have something else, so I called it pseudo-encopresis. But to cut a long story short, one of the things that I started externalising was sneaky poo. And we know how treacherous sneaky poo can be. It tries very hard to stick around, to dominate the lives of children for as long as possible. And externalising sneaky poo was very helpful to my thinking about the externalisation of other problems. Now that's just a bit of an introduction to externalisation. I started developing a program where sneaky poo was externalised. I started developing questions that enabled family members to unite together and challenge the oppression of sneaky poo. Okay, so that's sneaky poo. So with the externalisation of the problem, no longer is the person the problem, but the problem is the problem. Now, it's not a profound idea. It's taking me years and years and years to get that idea. Do you think it's a profound idea that the problem is the problem? You do? It's remarkable, isn't it? You've no idea the amount of study and time and analytical work that went into reaching that point. The problem is the problem.
You know the example of Sam and the sneaky poo? Well, this is something else that was given to Sam that I forgot to mention. It was a letter to Sneaky Poo that Sam and I wrote together. And every time Sam put Sneaky Poo in his proper place, he was to read this out, screw it up and throw it down, into the toilet. And I gave him about 100 copies of this. It says, to Sneaky Poo, read this. My name is Sam. I've just taught you a lesson that you should not forget. This is Sam's life, not your life. You can't trick me anymore. I won't let you mess my life up. You can't fool around with me, so take that. Signed, Samuel, Thomas Pink and Garfield. Garfield's his, support. I'll give you another example of an externalising conversation. I'm meeting this family, and they have a boy called James. And there seems to be a correlation between the name James and Larry and ADHD. If you have a James or a Larry, more chance that child will have ADHD. A lot of children I see are called James or Larry. With ADHD, and so they come into my room, and James is about, 9 years of age, 8 or 9 years of age, and suddenly my room is in a mess, chaos, rains, and things have been turned upside down, and I sit down and I'm talking to the parents as James is like a tornado, not a typhoon. You have typhoons, don't you? It's like a typhoon going around my room. And I say, well, it's interesting to meet you, and so I'm trying to concentrate with all this clapping and banging going on. And, I get to hear the family come to see me because they're concerned about James. And they tell me that James has ADHD, that he's taking some medication, but it's not enough. Surely there's more that can be done. I'd say, well, how did you find out about ADHD? And they said, well, the paediatrician told us, and this was confirmed by a psychologist, and so he's definitely got ADHD. So at least we know what the problem is. I said, well, that must be a relief, to know what the problem is. They said, well, yes, but all we now have to know is what to do about it. Okay. So my chair starts going up and down, like I'm on a fucking horse. Okay. I look down, there is James, and I'm feeling precarious, so I say to James, could you be a camel instead? Because I like riding on camels. Have you ridden on a camel? That's majestic and it's cruising, it's wonderful. So he tries to be a camel, so I'm going like this. And I'm saying to the parents, well, and it's very dreamy, it's lovely actually. I say it's like I get in a trance state, you know. And I say, well, what sort of ADHD has James got? What type is it? We have to know what type it is if we're going to treat it. And then James stops, thank heavens, and goes off and does something else. And I say, what do you mean what type of ADHD it is? Well, there are different types of ADHD, like everything else. Which type is this? They look at each other, and they think about their pediatrician, and they say, with indignation, well, he didn't tell us that. Quite indignant about not being given this information. And I said, well, I don't know what we can do if we don't know what type of ADHD it is. And they said, well, maybe you could tell us. And I'd say, well, I don't have diagnostic acumen. So you need to see someone with diagnostic acumen. Does anyone here have that? Diagnostic acumen? No? Anyway, I don't have diagnostic acumen. So I can't do that. I said, but maybe we could figure it out. Okay? Maybe James could help us. James, do you know that you've got ADHD? He nods his head and then goes on doing what he was doing. What sort of ADHD have you got, James? He pays no attention. And I said to the parents, have James ever seen his ADHD? I mean, it could be anything. It could be like a green Martian, for all I know. And so I turned to James, what colour is your ADHD? Okay? I get his attention. Okay? He says, I don't know. I say, haven't you ever seen your ADHD? He said, no. He knows you've got ADHD, but he's never seen it. Well, how do you know you've got it if you haven't seen it? He thinks that's a very good question. Okay? How does he know he's got ADHD if he's never seen his ADHD? And the parents think that's a bit strange. Was this second opinion a good thing to be doing? You know? And so I say, look, I think I know what sort of ADHD James has got. I think I know now. And they look relieved. Okay, well, give us the diagnosis. And I'd say, well, I saw a little boy 2 weeks ago. His name was Freddie. James's ADHD was just like Freddie's ADHD. The parents think, well, this is promising. We're getting on track now. And I say, well, the reason I think that James's ADHD is a twin brother to Freddie's ADHD. They're twin brothers. The parents think, you know, they thought they were getting something. So, and I say, well, James, have you got a brother? Oh, he knew he had a brother. He said, yes. Is he a twin brother? James knew that he wasn't. Children are fascinated by twins. So he knew what a twin was. And so I say, well, tell me, did you know that your ADHD's got a twin brother? Now he's really excited. His ADHD's got a twin brother. And I said, look, do you want to know what it looks like? He wants to know. I look at the parents. They want to know. Now the parents are getting interested. Because this is a fun, light-hearted approach to a deadly serious situation. They can see a few possibilities because James is getting engaged. So they come on side with me. So I go into my office and I come back with a painting of Freddie's ADHD. Freddie gave me a copy. Because I have these archives, therapeutic materials I share with others. I do this a lot. It's very helpful. So I come in and I say, here's Freddie's ADHD. Do you think yours looks like this ADHD? We all study it. And his parent says, yeah, look, I recognise this ADHD. This looks familiar. And so there's a general consensus that James' ADHD is a twin to Freddie's ADHD. And I said, well, how do we confirm this? We have to know for sure before we can take action. And so the parents say to me, well, how did Freddie know what his ADHD looked like? So Freddie was very clever. One night, he woke himself up in the middle of the night without any warning, and his ADHD was off duty, lazing around the place, and Freddie caught him napping. Before he could jump back in Freddie's life, Freddie took a picture of him with his mind. Okay? And the next morning, he painted ADHD. And so, but I don't know how James could find out what his ADHD looks like. I don't know what would work for him. So people talk about it for a while, and no one seems to know. And suddenly James has an idea. He says, I can wake myself up in the middle of the night. Now that's a good idea, James. And take a picture of my ADHD. So the parents say, look, okay, so this is the plan. You then go home, and James is going to do this so that we've got ADHD's number, so we can then figure out what ADHD is up to. Because what ADHD does will be true to ADHD's character. Is that clear? So we'll get to understand ADHD, we'll figure out how to out-trick ADHD. So I say, the parents say, well, what should we do? Because they've always had this homework, you know, behavioural management and all this sort of stuff. And so, pretty heavy stuff. And I'd say, look, the best thing for you to do, wait for it, and they're getting priming themselves, hoping it won't be too much of a burden, do nothing. I want you to do nothing. Well, maybe we could remind James to do this before he goes to sleep. I'd say, no, no, no. ADHD will get wind of it. You know, we'll be giving him a warning. Say nothing. But in the morning, when James wakes up, every morning for the next week, say to him, did you do it, James? When you're sitting down at breakfast, both of you say together, in unison, and you can practice here to get the lines, did you do it, James? Okay? Practice, they practice. James, did you hear that? When you hear that, James, your mum and dad will be asking you about ADHD. And they won't say anything more. They'll just say, did you do it, James? If you ask what, they won't tell you. Anyway, so they went home with this plan in mind. And so the first, when they came back to the next meeting, I heard that story. On the first evening, in the morning, when James was sitting at breakfast, they said in unison, did you do it, James? He said, do what? You know, thinks they're crazy. Oh, never mind, they say. The second morning at breakfast, they say, did you do it, James? This time he knows what it's about, but he hadn't done it. On the third morning, when they go to say, did you? He says, I've done it. Okay? He woke up and he took a picture of ADHD with his mind, and he painted it that morning. He brought this into the next meeting with him, and you should have seen this ADHD. It was terrifying. It was a mutant ninja version. It was a twin of Freddy's, but it was a mutant ninja version, mutated version, much more powerful. And I can understand why James's life was so much out of control. And so we put ADHD over here, and we got into a conversation about what this ADHD was up to. It was wrecking James's friendships with his teachers. It was throwing the spanner in the works in his friendships with his parents and so on. We got to explore how ADHD was affecting his life. Okay? That's another example of externalising conversation. So a lot of the outsider witness people I work with aren't professional people. They're drawn from my lists. When I'm working with families or with couples or with individuals, at the end of my work with them, I ask them whether or not they'd be interested in joining me in my work with someone else at some point in the future. Now, invariably people volunteer to put their name on a list, to be contacted at another point in time. They're interested in playing a part in my work with others. Okay? So I have lists. So I draw outsider witness people from those lists. And people are very enthusiastic to play a part in healing conversations with others. Okay? I also know the local Greek shopkeeper really well, and I might be working with a Greek family, and I know that he's put his name on a list to be an outsider witness to any conversations I might be having with a Greek family who are happy to have someone present. How many of you would have relatives? A few of you? No. Okay. Would some of you have parents? Sons, daughters, nephews, nieces, cousins, uncles, aunts, and so on? Well, sometimes I draw from my relative network. You know, I might have a niece who's very interested in playing a part in this work, and so she might put her name on a list. So some of you don't have relatives, right? Do you have friends? No? Okay. What about acquaintances? No, no, no. Neighbours? Neighbours? You have neighbours? Yeah? The potential outsider witness people are everywhere to be found. And I become centred and non-influential. Instead of asking some of the reauthoring questions that I could have easily asked her, because there's so many rich possibilities here, I shut the door on all of those, and I have an opinion about what she could now do. Okay? So I say, look, Lee, I'm really too happy about this. And I go ahead of her, and I say, Lee, I'm just wondering what you think about the idea of meeting with your mother and catching her up with this conversation. Okay? And I embroidered on this, and I realised that I'm way off the track. This is my idea, not Lee's idea. It's not a possibility that comes from her, it's one that comes from me. But you can see I'm enthusiastic about it. And halfway through embroidering on this, I realised that I'm way off the track. Don't do as I do, do as I say. Because this is not a good place to be. And I'm stuck, my mouth open, and I'm hoping some wisdom will come from my mouth. But wisdom deserts me totally. So I wind up just speaking. You know how, have you ever had that experience where you realise that you shouldn't be where you are? You think, where is your brain gone? So you're searching for your brain, your mouth is stuck open, and you keep going when you know your brain, but you don't know what else to do. So you see me doing that. And what you do is you notice that Lee brings me back down to earth again. Okay? She actually brings me back down to earth. She lets me know that this is my idea, not hers, that it's an imposition, but she does it graciously, lovingly. She brings me back down to earth in the most loving, caring way, which I later could acknowledge to her about how this warmed my life. So I just thought I'd share this piece with you. Do you know that the people who consult us persevere with us, don't they? Through thick and thin. And when we somehow get our feet off the ground and we're somewhere where we shouldn't, a lot of the people who consult us are very benevolent. You know, they politely let us know that this is not where they really want to be in the conversation. Or they wait patiently for us to get our feet on the ground again, and then they quickly reinforce that, by making us feel good about our work. They give us a sense that we have wisdom, so they quickly reinforce that. And so you can see that Lee is playing a powerful role in shaping these therapeutic conversations.